The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Pennsylvania High School Football Report podcast. I'm Brian Linder. I'm here with Dan Sostek. Dan, let me hear your voice.
Dan.
Eric Epler.
Hello.
And we got Evan Wheaton. Our guy Evan Wheaton's here too. Evan, let him hear your voice.
Hello, hello.
So now you know who these people are. If you listen to the podcast, you probably already knew who they were. Got Evan coming on this week. Evan's been out. We've been ramping up our spring football coverage here, just checking in with teams and telling some of the stories. We had some stories develop on the recruiting trail here over the last couple months, since football season wrapped up. So we're checking on some of our top guys there, and then into some of our programs around the Mid-Penn. Evan was out yesterday, actually, at Cumberland Valley. I wanted to say, first of all, be looking at PennLive for this coverage because we'll have stuff almost every day. But Evan, especially through May, we'll have stuff almost every day. Evan, you went out to Cumberland Valley. Cumberland Valley is a team we're excited about. Mid-Penn, Commonwealth's looking big this year, but as far as like Harrisburg, maybe getting those big time transfers, CDE, seeing what they have coming back. State College is always good. We run down that list. But Cumberland Valley was a school that we had Josh Oswald on here a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about having so many kids that they gotta almost have tryouts, and the combine to see, what kids run to get them in the weight room and all. You were out there yesterday. What did you see from them in the spring practice, Evan? What was that like out there?
I mean, they're hard at work. I said last season that I thought they were one of the more compelling teams storyline-wise to flip around a 1-4 start, go further in the postseason than they did the year prior, and play Manheim Township a heck of a lot better than I think most teams did last year. And you can tell that they know that they're moving in a good direction over the past few years, and it seems like it's kind of motivating them right now. Talk with Coach Oswald. And a few of the guys, they had reached that postseason 2 years ago, won a game, playoffs last year. Now they say, why not us get to that district final? So you can tell it's kind of been sort of some off-season motivation for them.
Like I said, by the time this podcast comes out, that story went up today, and that's probably going to be a little more than a week old when it comes out. But we'll have other stories too, and we'll talk about some of the stuff you're doing this weekend, Evan, which will, people will probably be seeing more on the site when this podcast comes out. But Cumberland Valley's got some holes to fill too. They graduated some top guys. Obviously, Bryce Starrett's the running back. What did you see from their skill guys out there?
I mean, obviously it's May. Everyone's still kind of working out there right now. I was trying to take my eyes off of what I was seeing from Tyler Merrill to look at the skill guys a little bit more. I mean, he's just a beast. One of the most heavily recruited guys in the Mid-Penn. So I had to peel my eyes away from seeing him work to look at the skill guys. Nolan Bazalka, I was catching up with him, tight end, pass rusher, just talking with him about coming off of his basketball season, kind of piggybacking off the whole motivation thing, how he sort of led Cumberland Valley to its first District 3 boys basketball title in program history. Marching to the same beat of the whole why not us, get to that district final again, kind of rise to new heights there. Everyone in the skill groups are kind of working with that motivation.
Tyler Merrill, you bring him up, national level recruit. I think, wrote the first story ever on Tyler Merrill.
Yep.
I texted Dan, he sent me a photo of Tyler yesterday, and I said, man, he's looking massive.
Yeah. I remember Mike Craig, we was at our sports at our fall meeting at Cumberland Valley's athletic director. Mike Craig's like, we've got a freshman that you guys are going to want to see. And none of us had heard about him because he's pretty raw, but Josh Oswald promised Nick Saban was going to come through, and wasn't exactly correct, but he did end up getting that Alabama offer.
What did you see from him, Evan?
Well, when I was talking with him, he said something that really stuck out to me after practice. Talking about kind of the new look Commonwealth, all these teams coming in, Bishop McDevitt headlining that group, Harrisburg being loaded. Tyler Merrill, to quote him verbatim here, he said, "They're not immortal; they're killable giants." And he's a giant himself, so I think he's got the expertise on that. So, that kind of sticks out to me that they believe in who they have in their program.
Well, that was something Brian and I were talking about off podcast a week ago. Is like, if you had to line, because Ep does our lines every year, I'm really interested to see how we're going to line the Bishop McDevitt Cumberland Valley game this year, because McDevitt loses a lot of talent. So does Cumberland Valley, but I just don't know how I would line it. Like I think McDevitt would be the favorite, but I'm really interested to see how Cumberland Valley matches up against that team.
The algorithm is not complete yet, but it will be complete in the next couple of weeks. So I'll get you an early line.
So the mystery lives on for a few more days.
Yes.
But I mean, to me, that's fascinating. That I think that kind of explains why, again, we're so interested in Cumberland Valleys, because I really just don't know. We won't know until they go out and see him, because since they lost Isaac Signs, I think the question is kind of how are they going to move the ball in offense? And now that they don't have Bryce Starretts, who accounted for felt like every single one of their yards last year besides Caden Pines. There's definitely some questions there. But if they figure and they lose Alex Save too, who's one of the best linebackers in the area, but Bazolka's going to get better. And there definitely is enough talent there, and it's a big enough roster, and you have a good enough coaching staff there, that I do think and you have that Haas on the line and Tyler Merrill, who's going to keep getting better, because he's as raw as can be still. Still a guy that has a lot of room for growth. I'm just really fascinated by how they can compete with a Bishop McDevitt team that's going to be loaded again, but is going to be replacing a lot of talent as well.
Alex Suave, I mean, another guy getting replaced. When I hear his name, I kind of think of that State College game, right, where he had that heads-up play to prevent OT with that goal line fumble recovery, and that was a point in the season for them where it was basically do or die every game, so in that playoff push. So, defensive side of the ball too, they got some guys to replace, but Coach Oswald had said, like, everyone who was there last year is just another year more mature, and people, they have some underclassmen who are starting some games, and, they got a deep group coming back, it sounds like.
Do you think Bazolka is going to be more involved in the passing game? Because that was something I kind of got from Josh, is that he kept mentioning him as a tight end, which he was used a little bit last year, but most of their yardage in the passing game was to Caden Pines, who graduates. I think they still have his brother Brody. But if I'm looking at Cumberland Valley's roster, I'm trying to get Nolan Bazolka the ball somehow. I don't even know. Maybe you put him at running back, honestly. I don't know, but that kid's such a good athlete. I've talked about it before. For his size, how he plays basketball and the position he plays, it's such like a different way than you'd expect. And he didn't make All-State, and I think one of the reasons he didn't make All-State was because of his lack of points per game, which is kind of the way Cumberland Valley basketball plays. But if you watched him play, he's basically a point guard there playing forward. He's a point forward pretty much, and that requires a level of movement that I think he can play almost any position on that offense. And so if I'm CV, I'm going to be looking to get him the ball.
He
was pulling down a couple passes in some of the reps that I had seen.
Yeah,
he's Ross Tucker approved. Our buddy Ross Tucker texts me from time to time about different guys he sees, and just see, what I see on them or what we might know on them. And he's texted me several times about Nolan.
He's going to be a Division I football player, I imagine. I think he had one of those playoffs where, do you remember it wasn't to this degree, because Terrell Reynolds' playoffs 2 years ago was one of the most insane things I've ever seen. I think he finished with literally 12 sacks in 3 or 4 games. But Bazolka was on that pace if he got as many games. He was going berserk in the postseason last year, and to the point where I completely forgot he wasn't even graduating. So he felt like a senior last year. So I honestly think he'll be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year next year when it's all said and done.
One thing that Coach Oswald had said to me that kind of stuck out in terms of Nolan was that, watching him in the basketball season, just the way he was more vocal during timeouts. And I think I caught a little bit of that during their game against Trinity, just kind kind of corralling guys and being more vocal and this and that. It seems like he's kind of translating more leadership qualities to football now. And, that was, I guess, a jump that he had made during basketball season as well.
The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.
And the other thing is this weekend, and again, like I said, you guys be sure to check out PennLive for all this. Evan, you're heading to Jersey, right? What do you got going on in Jersey this weekend, my man?
I'm going to the Under Armour Next Camp Series in New Jersey. Also planning to do one in Baltimore, but kind of a last-minute decision to head on up there this Sunday. Staying with a friend Saturday, and then going to be checking out some Pennsylvania guys, some guys from my old haunt in Greater Philly as well. Going to catch up with a few of them and see what I see out there.
I think here's a story to get from out there. Andrew Olesh is going to be there, the big tight end. He might be, we talk about Matt Zollers. Again, forgive my pronunciation, whichever's right, we'll roll with it. Is the quarterback, and then Stone Saunders, guys like that. Andrew Olesh might be the most recruited guy in Pennsylvania. I mean, he's got a ton of big-time offers, like Alabama. I think Georgia might be on that list. Just about everybody, the big tight end. That's kind of like that. I think that's an interesting story, Evan. I think for us to try to tell is this. He might be the most recruited guy or have the most impressive offer list in Pennsylvania.
You think teams are looking for a kid who's a junior in high school who's 6'5", 215 pounds? You think that's something that colleges might be interested in? I mean, that kid is that doesn't grow on trees to be that filled out already, and he looks like an NFL tight end is a junior in high school already.
He's on, and I think that I really do think he's probably might have the most impressive offer list in the state, and really, this might be the first time we've said his name on the podcast.
It's either him or Messiah.
Yeah, I think he flies under the radar a little bit with the big name running backs and quarterbacks, right? So,
yeah. Well, tight ends are people too.
Tight ends are people too. Just ask Nolan Bazalka.
The Cameron Brickle kid's going to be there too. I think Malvern kid. I think he just got Alabama this week. Who are some of the other kids that you got on the list there, Evan, that we know for Pennsylvania who are right now signed up to be there?
Well, I talked about Matt Zoller, Stone Saunders. I'm looking at just Pennsylvania guys right now. Dimitri Toman from Perkiomen Valley sticks out to me because I covered the area. Lex Cyrus from Susquehanna Township. Tyler Merrill again. Sean Lee Jr. from Harrisburg, just to name a few.
I'd be interested to see Sean compete at defensive back too. Like I think Sean could play quarterback, but again, we've said it before. I think probably his best next level is defensive back. So it's going to be a big weekend for you. Couple big weeks, big month for us in PennLive as far as football. I don't think a lot of people are probably doing spring football in Pennsylvania. We are. We're just kind of checking in with everybody and catching up on some of these big recruiting stories and recruits. So that'll be fun. Wanted to hop into last week, and Evan, you can stick around for this and throw in anything you like. We're coming off our last podcast. We talked about NFL draft, guys from Pennsylvania who got picked, and where they are signed and where they ended up. And this week, we wanted to throw a few names out there for guys who could end up hearing their name called next year. Dan, you put together a list. Who are some of the top guys, Dan, that we're looking at right now who we think might have a chance to hear their name called next year?
Yeah, I mean, the mock drafts at this point of the year are always like, hey, this could be the draft, and you look a year later, and it's about as wrong as can be. I think actually this year it probably end up – actually, no, it'd be wrong because no one had Jaden Daniels go number 2. Everyone had Drake May go number 2. So there always is changes. But PA high school alums, there aren't a ton in these early ones, but the one that is repeatedly popping up, and anyone who watches the Nittany Lions on Saturdays would not be surprised. It's Abdul Carter. That kid's – we saw him play at LaSalle. Well, actually, we didn't because I believe the game they played at Bishop McDevitt his senior year, he did not play. So as
a whole, we saw him at LaSalle.
We saw him on Huddle. But that kid he's a special player. There's a reason they gave him. I believe that he has Micah Parsons 11 right at Penn State now. I don't think even he would compare himself to Micah Parsons or anything like that. But he is a hell of a football player, and I think he's going to be a really good player. Him and Nick Singleton are the two guys. We've kind of talked about Nick and his. I think even he would kind of agree that he probably wasn't. It wasn't the sophomore year he was expecting. It was still a good year for most running backs, but I think when you're that type of running back that kind of looks like Adrian Peterson light his freshman year, you kind of want to see a jump up, and it'll be a big junior year from him. But I think if he has a capable junior year, that will he'll probably enter the draft and get picked pretty high because he's just a freak athlete. So those two Penn State guys are probably the two biggest names on that are draft prospects so far. But you don't know who's going to pop up.
Yep, I'll tell you one of the interesting things here. Abdul Carter, and this is an X factor for him. He's a little bit of a thicker linebacker. We did the story with Lance Dean's been going down to the CDE's head coach who trains Micah Parsons, been going up this Penn State, actually working with him some on the side, getting him ready to play defensive end because he's going to play some there this year. He's working with a guy who's getting some pretty excellent results. I'm excited to see where Abdul goes with it. Got a couple rough headlines over the last 2 years as far as some legal stuff. Abdul, got to get that cleaned up, buddy. If you want to go in the first round with no issues.
Micah had some stuff as well. You move past it.
He was never.
Yeah, it was never official, but he
was never considered charged with anything, and I think there have been a couple of charges. Excuse and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So there's a difference there. But I don't think it's anything major or severe.
If he puts together a clean junior year, no one's going to care because he's that good.
Yeah, he's a freak athlete. So, yep, I know you know a little bit about Abdul Carter. I know you know a little bit about Nick Singleton too. Again, Dan stole my thunder there. I always say I thought his senior year looked Adrian Peterson like. Last year, a little bit of the explosion I thought was going. I don't know what's going on with my guy.
Yeah, as far as Carter, it was interesting when it was a pretty good class coming out from PA. Keon Wiley was part of that class. And, I remember talking with folks and they were like, well, who's the one guy that could step right into Penn State? And Carter already had like an NFL body at 18. I mean, he was the most complete player. And we were, even my colleague at the time, we were just like, listen, Carter's going to play right away at Penn State. He should. And he was the most ready. So I don't think that's changed. I think he's got the NFL frame. I think he's got the wits. He's speedy enough. He's certainly strong. He's proven that at linebacker position. So I like him a lot. Singleton, I just think too. Singleton is just he's explosive. Obviously, once he gets in that second level, and I just don't know that Penn State has been consistently strong up front to kind of provide the kind of holes for him. I think at times too, for a guy like that, I never like him to start with no momentum.
Yeah.
And in Penn State's scheme, he starts a lot of runs with no momentum.
Yeah.
4 yards behind, 5 yards behind line of scrimmage.
Pitches and
I just don't like that for a guy like that. If he gets that little seam, and if he's already 5-6 yards with a head start, I think that's the way you put him. But again, I don't call the offense at Penn State, so that's just me. I think you're right, though. I think he was absolutely more dynamic, if you want to call it that, the year prior. But he's still an unbelievable talent, and
his career's almost mirroring Miles Sanders a little bit, right?
Sort of, yes.
It's kind of reminiscent of that. Where, I mean, I think probably you guys would say I was in Pittsburgh when Miles Sanders was there, so I had kind of a warped view of him. But I mean, he was a pretty blue chip recruit in his own right as well. And I mean, he's had a good NFL career too, but it's it's not been, I think what people expect as a 5-star running back from there. So it'll be interesting to see.
He was more of a slasher type when he
Yeah.
was.
Sanders and they're definitely different body types.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nick is built more. He's a little bit more compact.
Yeah, but just in terms of the career arc.
But yeah, I believe. But I think they're both have shown a toughness too, which neither one is huge. They're by any stretch. But I think Singleton is definitely the bigger body and probably a little bit more. I guess you call it durable. I guess maybe, but Sanders has done pretty well too.
I will throw a little aside to you guys. When you mentioned Penn State's front, I've heard that before, but at the same time, because I was thinking this during the draft when you brought up, because I was thinking this during the draft. I've heard that before. They had like 3 guys in the top 5 rounds, including Olu Fashanu was 11th overall or something like that. Caden Wallace to the Patriots. Both of their tackles and their center, Hunter Norzad, all got drafted. So you wonder, like, maybe it is something scheme-wise. Maybe they're changing that or something. I don't know.
Well, it goes down to metrics. It comes down to metrics for a lot of those guys too. Yeah. And again, you could, as well as I do, if you got one faulty link on the line of scrimmage, it doesn't work. I mean, that's why these guys from Bama are so good and Georgia are so good. I mean, there's no chink in the armor up front. Well, and again, it's a different running scheme too. It's just a different package. And I just think that, again, you can't run simple toss rights and lefts all the time. I get it. But a lot of what Nick Singleton does is he's starting at 0, 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So if he does not find that gap right away, it's not an explosive run. So, but he certainly, I mean, we've all seen the talent of that kid. We've all seen the talent of Abdul Carter. And I'm really interested in what happens to both of those guys too. And it quite frankly, it's a monster year for Rucci. Yeah, because he did not have the kind of career that everybody thought he'd have at Wisconsin. He's now at Penn State. It's a monster year for him. I mean, and again, metrics come through. Yeah, he kid's 6'8". He's built like a tree, and he's got good feet. So, but again, he's got to prove it this year.
That's Nolan Rucci from World Star. Caught a touchdown pass though at Wisconsin. So drafted, but.
Speaking of metrics, a guy that I put on this list too, I don't think is on any mock drafts right now, but I think Brian, you caught up with him recently, and I think we all agree in terms of athleticism and traits, he looks like an NFL player. That's Anthony Smith on Minnesota, from Shippensburg alum from Minnesota. Brian, you've been talking to him, and I feel like if he lives up to the type of player he could be, he's a guy that could all of a sudden be on every draft board in America.
Anthony Smith is a guy who we ranked, Dan, off of one game before anybody else. And it was Redland, and he had 6 sacks. I was there, and I watched all 6 of them. And I remember telling his coach afterwards, man, that's where this kid, he's a basketball player. And I was like, no, he's not. He's like, oh, well, he thinks he is. I was like, well, he's not.
Because I covered him at the PO too, and he would always say he likes basketball more.
Anthony Smith is like 6'7". I haven't looked up his latest height and weight at Minnesota, but I would have to think he's bigger now. 6'7". He was like 250 out there, freak of nature. He hasn't got a lot of running in Minnesota, but I did talk to him lately, and he told me that he's been really working on some stuff and feels effing unstoppable. And
if that guy figures it out, we've said it since his high school days, right? If he harnesses the ability, that's an NFL football player.
He could be a first rounder with his athletic ability. If he had one season where he just blew up, Anthony Smith could be in the first round.
Yep, no doubt about it in my mind. That kid, I think he was also he had like never done Shoppa before and placed third in it in the state or something like that. Like he's just one of those. He's one of those rare athletes.
You got some other guys on this list. Julian Fleming's very, very interesting. He went to Ohio State. They've had probably 11 first rounders, it feels like, since he went there. It seems like they have 2 every year. He was kind of like the third guy there for 2 years in a row. Now he's coming to Penn State to be the number 1. In high school, I've seen a lot of great wide receivers. He's up there with them. And I don't care what level he was playing on. I think he's a really good player. If he has a big year at Penn State, I could see him being a top, 4 or 5 round pick and maybe even being a productive player in the league. I'm excited to see what he does this year. I don't know that I have a ton of confidence right now in their quarterback situation. But if Aller gets it going like people think he might, then it could be a big year for him.
Yep, yeah, and I put 3 different Southern Columbia players on this list too, because we also have Cal Halliday, who I know Epp is a big fan of.
Huge
really
fan of that guy.
Yeah, and Preston Zekman, who's been pretty good at Wisconsin. But Epp, you really like Cal Halliday, and I think Michigan State does too. He's basically played every game since he got to campus.
They love him in East Lansing, and I think he's one of those guys too that I think the Lions will be targeting him because they tend to keep the guys around who are local and doing well, and I see him being like an Anzalone.
Yeah,
that kind of player just keep showing up. I mean, I don't know. Alex is in the league now, what, 8 years?
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, he led Wyomissing 2012 to the state title game.
Always on a playoff team, it feels like too.
Yeah, and I just think he's going to have a really long NFL career. He's a dynamic player and good guy, hard nosed guy, exactly what you want in the middle of your lineup. So I think he's going to have a tremendous career. I'm still waiting on Fleming. I don't know. I'll be honest with you.
I'm with that.
As far as athleticism, unbelievable. But I think he'd probably be the first one to tell you too that he has not had the kind of college career that he had hoped for at this point. But he's got a chance here, as obviously he's going to be a 1 or 2 at Penn State this year. And it's like Rucci. It's going to be it's a big year for him.
We have a lot of guys. We have a lot of guys that are kind of fascinating here. That they could go, they could end up playing their way out of it, or really being a lot higher up the boards than anybody could imagine at this moment.
Ayon Hayes is another one too that just transferred to Colorado. The last few years he's been one of those guys. I've watched a lot of Pitt football, and he would have games where he just would completely wreck the game and would be unblockable. Then there'd be some games where he'd disappear and he'd end the season with 4 or 5 sacks. But if that kid puts it all together, I think he's a day 2 pick.
Yeah.
Now, picking Colorado over I don't blame him at all for transferring from the University of Pittsburgh, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it works out and maybe I'll look like an idiot, but I don't know. I feel like he had options to go to somewhere like USC or somewhere where I think you probably have a better chance to develop as a defensive player than it's a pretty distraction heavy school there now in Colorado. And, but he's such a talented kid that I think if he harnesses just a little bit of that, and, maybe he just wanted to play on a team that's going to be playing on national TV every game because he picks up a couple sacks on national TV games. That might be all he needs. Maybe that's part of his plan. And you know what? If that's the case, then honestly, maybe it's not that bad of an idea after all. But I've always really liked him as a football player. So I think it's a big year for him.
Westinghouse kid there. Couple quarterbacks real quick. Will Howard, who's at Ohio State from Downingtown. Kyle McCord, who's at Syracuse from St. Joe's Prep. The way quarterbacks are valued, I don't think Kyle McCord's getting there because I don't think he has the rocket arm or he's not a runaround guy, but I think he's very solid. I could see him getting drafted. He has a really good year at Syracuse and he came out or whatever. I could see him getting picked just because of the way quarterbacks are valued. And I do think he's a good football player, has a good head on his shoulders. Will Howard is an interesting guy to me because I think he has a really good arm, not necessarily the most mobile guy. He goes to Ohio State and has a really good year. He's another guy that could be.
It's a weak quarterback class too, really weak.
So he could move up. He could be a top 3 round.
Like right now, Quinn Ewers and Shitter Sanders are the number 1 battling for the number 1 quarterback spot, which means anyone can be the number 1 quarterback in this draft.
What did you say his name again?
Yeah. I can't pronounce it.
Shedeur?
Look, I think when I look at these 2 guys, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, I'm thinking Will Howard, big year, he could be top 3 rounds. Kyle McCord, really good year. I'm thinking 4th, 5th, 6th round. He could get a flyer. But just because of his head, and I think he's gonna do well talking to coaches.
And then just because I always have to give a shout out to a couple of my Pitt guys, I think both safeties for Pitt are, borderline NFL guys. Donovan McMillan obviously has that pedigree, and he's one of all these Western PA guys who go to these bigger schools, don't get playing time, then come back to Pitt and have more success there. He had a good year last year. His brother's pretty good on Peters Township as well too. I don't think he's quite as good as Donovan, but Donovan's a big-bodied safety that I think could definitely get looks at the next level. And then Javon McIntyre, just another guy from Emotep. They just keep popping up on all these lists. Just have been I think this will be his third year starting for Pitt. Just a really, really good safety. And Pitt defensive backs have a pretty good track record. So those two guys, I've been impressed with watching them a decent amount.
You've got my guy Nick Dawkins, who could start at center this year for Penn State.
He's really good.
Kid. I've been to his house, and he's Daryl Dawkins' son. I think I told you guys this, but
my grandma met Daryl Dawkins.
Well, he took me over to right by their front door. They have a closet that was Daryl Dawkins' closet, and it's pretty much been undisturbed since he passed.
Yeah,
and Nick and his mom carried me over to his closet, and they opened it up. And here's all these nice suits, and still into the plastic and stuff from the.
I got to forward him the wonderful picture. My grandma loved Daryl. Met him on a cruise ship, and it was one of the highlights of her life.
He takes a suit jacket off and puts it on me, and again, I'm about 6 foot, and I'm a hefty guy. I could have slept in this thing. It was touching the floor, and it enveloped me. But I wore one of Daryl Dawkins' suit jackets because his son put it on me. It was pretty cool. It's a great family.
Chocolate Thunder, right? That's his nickname.
Yeah, Chocolate Thunder. He's a great family. I wrote in the story, and they joke about it. They have these life-size cutouts of him, and when he passed, they used to put them in the windows to scare the neighbors.
I would not mess with Daryl Dawkins if I saw him in the window.
They would look up and they would know that Daryl passed, but then all of a sudden he's standing in the window looking at them.
So as a ghost.
Yes, they would mess with the neighbors. Nick's a great kid. You know what? He has a big social media presence.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Penn State linemen just seem to get drafted.
I wrote Nick. If you listen to this, and we ate it somewhere up there at Parkland. Our photographer at the time, and me and Nick, because I stayed overnight down there and did a story on him, went to the game, and then hung out with him all day. We ate some. He carried us to some restaurant, and had the best chicken tenders I've ever ate. Which big offensive lineman knew where to go. So, but he's a great kid, man. There's a lot of interest. CJ Dupree, who's at Alabama now from Lakeland. I've worked with him some. Eric Gentry is a kid, guys, who went to Newman Goretti. He's like the longest, biggest linebacker. He's 6'7" or whatever, playing linebacker. So he's not really, to me, like, and he's not like an edge linebacker. He's like a long, lanky kid. And I think that he's just so different in a way that some NFL teams are going to give him a look, whether it's through.
That's why I put him on there. If you have these weird traits, there's going to be one of these teams that thinks they can harness it, right?
It's like 6'7", 210 or something. He's not like an edge. He's just this long, lanky freak out there. So I could see him getting a shot. Sam Brown, you got here down here for Rutgers. I don't know how much he's done at Rutgers. I loved him in high school.
He's had a couple 300-yard rushing seasons, which honestly at Rutgers might be pretty darn good given how behind the eight ball that offensive line is in the Big Ten.
And you got Tysheem Johnson on this list, who went to Ole Miss out of Newman Goretti. Now he's at Oregon. He's not a very big guy. He's super explosive, so gets that figured out. I don't know. It's a really interesting class. We could have, a lot of these guys aren't really in there, but we have a couple guys here with the kind of physical traits that if they have big seasons, guys, we could have several first rounders or second, top 3 rounders from Pennsylvania. So it's
Brandon George, also a guy that's really just watching him for 5 years. That kid has gotten so much better from when he showed up to Pitt as a freshman, and basically could only run in a straight line. He was as much of a rundown only linebacker as you could find, and has really worked hard to become a pretty good football player, pretty good linebacker there. So another guy that I think probably doesn't get drafted, but will probably end up on a UDFA contract or something somewhere.
So it's going to be an interesting year to watch these guys develop. We'll keep doing that. Evan and all of us will kind of be doing some high school football through this month.
Yeah.
I think we got a podcast. What have we learned? What have we learned?
That
We learned that tight ends are people too.
Yeah. Cumberland Valley, don't go to a practice there without some tissues.
Let's wrap this. All right. Let's do this. Guys, we got a podcast. We got a bunch of stuff coming to PennLive.com. Epler, tell them how to find you on social media.
At 3Jacker on X.
Dan, tell them how to find you.
Dan_Sostek.
Evan, tell them how to find you. You got a lot of football coming up. You want to follow this guy.
Evan Wheaton on Twitter.
And I'm at Sports by B Linder at Twitter, at X, whatever you want to call it, whatever Elon Musk is calling it this week before his next rager. And check out PennLive.com. Guys, we'll see you in next week.
Whenever.
That was that's exactly how the pros do it.
The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.